Get your full access pass ready because we're about to dive into the access layer. By the end of this video, we will be able to describe the access layer and its properties. The access layer is where we connect all of our end devices to the network. And so you might think that the access layer configuration is pretty straightforward. We're just connecting things into these switches and they should work, right? Well, for better or worse, there's a lot that we need to understand about that access layer, a lot of configuration parameters that belong in there. And so in this video, we want to explore exactly what we can expect when we're deploying and configuring access layer switches. As we've mentioned so many times already in this skill, when we have devices that need to connect to the network, we're typically connecting those via access layer switches. Access layer switches can typically be layer 2 switches, although sometimes they're layer 3. And they can take on different forms. They could be fixed configuration, which means, hey, they may come with 48 ports and that's it. We can't add more ports or functionality to them. Or hey, maybe they're chassis switches. Chassis switches are larger in size and we do actually populate slots with functionality. And so we might have a chassis switch that has 4 or 5 slots and then we can put 48 port line cards or 24 port line cards into the chassis switch. They can also be stackable switches. Stackable switches have been around now for the better part of the last decade. What they do is, instead of taking disparate switches like we have here on the left, two independent switches that we connect together, instead what we do is we use a backplane cable, and this turns this functionally into a single switch. We can think of it as if it's one switch instead of 2 switches. What this allows us to do is more easily manage the set of switches, and by the way, this is going to reduce our spanning tree domain, and we'll cover this in more detail in a future skill. Now, as far as the devices are concerned, it's any end device in the network. So yes, we typically think of PCs and laptops hardwired in. We can think of phones, specifically IP phones that are connecting to the network, and they tend to get their power off the network as well. So we use power over Ethernet or PoE for those. Same with wireless access points. Access points will connect in at the access layer and again receive PoE to power them. We might have security cameras. Security cameras are going to be watching the halls for us, right? And recording footage. And then beyond that, we also have telepresence units. These would be video conferencing systems. They're going to connect in, and sometimes they will feed off of PoE, sometimes not. But either way, all of these devices are connecting to the network to gain network access. So what are some of the services that access layer switches provide to our end devices? Well, one thing that comes to mind is VLAN assignment. When a device gets plugged into a network port, we tend to say on the port specifically, hey, this port belongs to VLAN, let's just say 10 in this case. And therefore any traffic showing up on that port will belong to VLAN 10. This is especially important for phones where the phone might have a PC hanging off of it, and so 2 different VLANs are going to be connecting across that single port. Well, if the voice VLAN, let's say the voice VLAN is 20, but then again that laptop is coming in on VLAN 10, and so we need to be able to distinguish between those. Cisco uses the switch port voice command in order to accomplish this. Now another service we're providing is quality of service tagging. When traffic lands onto a network switch, just like with the VLAN assignment, we need to understand what type of traffic it is in order to properly tag with QoS. So a video conferencing system, we might want to tag with a QoS value of 4. And that can take different forms. We talk about IP precedence and DSCP and class of service. All of these are different marking types, and we're going to cover these later on in the Encore blueprint. Meanwhile, we might want to tag a voice packet with a tag of 5, and that way, as we pass this traffic up to the network, we have some traffic with 4, some traffic with 5, some traffic like laptop traffic, that's typically untagged, that might be 0. And then the network devices upstream will be able to differentiate between these traffic types and make sure that the most important traffic, specifically that voice traffic, is going to be protected relative to, say, just internet downloads. Also within the world of QoS, we need to worry about this concept of a trust boundary. What that means is that a laptop could set its own tag to, let's say, a value of 5, and do we want to trust that the PC knows what it's talking about? I mean, this could be a user with bad intentions trying to prioritize their own internet downloads over those voice calls, which would be bad. This is where we would say, you know what, we're not going to trust our PCs. Hey, we'll trust our phones because these are Cisco devices and we trust that. And on the other side of the phone, it's not going to trust the PC there. However, we need to define that trust boundary because there might be some devices that we are willing to trust, again, such as phones, such as video devices, such as security cameras, and even access points we should be trusting. So defining the trust boundary on the access layer is an important part of configuring QoS. What about security? Do we need to worry about security at the access layer? And the answer is, of course, yes, we should worry about security everywhere. But specifically, what type of security? Well, in the access layer, there are 2 main types. We have 802.1x And this is an authentication protocol that allows me to, as a user logs into the network, we have to provide, right down here, we have to provide our username and password just to gain network access. 802.1x is configured on all of the access switches, and the access switch will then send that authentication request up to the authentication server to find out if that username and password is valid. The other option that we have is port security. Port security is really looking at the MAC address of the different devices, and so as I connect a new PC in, it's going to say, hey, what is that MAC address, and does it match what's configured on this port here? We can also use port security to reduce the number of MAC addresses supported on an interface, so a user doesn't take their interface and, hey, maybe it was connected to their PC, but hey, we're going to unplug our PC, put a network switch in, and hang not only the PC off of it, the drawing's getting a little small down here, but hang the PC off of it, as well as, I don't know, something they brought in from home, maybe some kind of small server or game device or something. So as we can see here, the access layer can get a little busy. However, it really comes down to focusing on VLAN assignments, QoS, and security, at least the security mechanisms that we apply at the access layer. And with that, you are now able to describe the access layer and its properties. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.